Today I've got a really unique video for you guys. This is actually a whole video from my membership site, FromTheField.farm, and we're doing a drone tour, an aerial tour of Coen Farm. So I'm sitting there with TAKOTA, he's mic'd up, and we're just flying the drone over his farm and showing you all the amazing earthworks that he's done on this incredible regenerative farm. He's got a kilometer-long swale. They harvest 40 years of water every single year onto this farm. And if you just look around the neighboring farms, they're all brown. This farm is totally green. It's an incredible regenerative operation, and there's so much to learn from it. And this video was a two-part series that I did in 1 week. So sometimes I split things up because to do it all in one video doesn't make sense. This particular week we did the drone tour, and then there was another video walking around the farm, and this is the whole part of that part. And if you guys like stuff like this, check out FromTheField.farm, my membership site. The link is in the show notes, and if you want to become a member, you can do so up until October 18th. And up until that time, I'm putting out a video every single day to showcase what's in the site. And so if you like that kind of stuff and you're curious about it, go over, check it out, sign up. And if you don't like it within the first 30 days, you get your money back, no questions asked, no hard feelings. It's not for everybody. This site's really for people who are looking for detailed content about specific subject matter within sustainable agriculture. And it's been my job to go around and interview all these great people. And I take a lot of suggestions from the membership. I went to go to see Carl Hammer in Vermont based on somebody asking me, hey, why don't you go check out Vermont Compost? And you know, I'd known about them, but I'd never thought to go over there and check it out. I was in Quebec doing a bunch of videos with great growers, and so let's drive down to Vermont and check out Vermont Compost. So the site is constantly evolving based on what my members are asking me. And each week I do a Q&A where people post things in the forum, and I answer people's questions. I do that in the form of a YouTube live video sometimes, but for the most part, it's up as an audio podcast. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy this one. And again, follow the link in the show notes if you want to check it out. Enjoy.
This is the kind of yard site here. So the building on the left of the screen is that's my parents' house there. It's a straw bale house, ICF basement, super efficient. You know, the entire thing runs off wood heat. And then all around that house are we've got a kitchen garden right there, main crop garden just on the other side, our root cellars right next door, our wood sheds. We've got a forest garden just outside of kind of the zone 2 area, and all this stuff is just the whole point of the you know, zones 1 and 2 is looking after your kind of self-sufficiency, your basic food needs, making it really efficient, effective to look after yourself, so that when you get out into your zones further out, you don't get overwhelmed by, you know, not be able to look after yourself. Mm-hmm. Then right next to the house is a shop slash living quarters and car shed. So actually that's where I live. There's a loft above there, and we do everything. It's a really important flex space. So we do food processing in there. That's where my dairy milking system is. At certain times of the year, it's a butcher shop for harvesting our own animals. It's also entirely wood heat, and what else? Yeah, it used to be kind of more of a machine shop, but we're actually building another one because it doesn't really make sense for that part of the house. And then we've got our wood sheds, just those two buildings right there, yeah. And so that's like 4 years worth of wood right there. That's stored. Part of that's because our buildings are really well insulated, and part of it's because we have really good wood stoves. So in my parents' place, they have a 4,500 pound kakolov or a Tula-Kiwi masonry soapstone heater, and 2 armloads of wood keeps the house just perfect in -30. It's just an unbelievable stove. So it's really efficient. And that's kind of our zones 1 and 2 is all about self-sufficiency, making sure that everything in that area is all we basically need to survive. And once we get out into across this road here, basically, we get into our zones 3, 4, and 5. So that little dogleg paddock that follows the driveway there, that's actually our dairy cow paddock. This guy here.
Okay.
And that's incorporated inside of a 5-row multi-species shelter belt / forest garden that we have, edible berries and things in there. But our dairy cows graze all through that system, and that's one of the spokes of our hub and spoke integrated livestock system. And so the dairy cows can rotate through this really nice shaded agroforestry silver pasture system, but then they're able to come back to the central hub to be milked once a day.
Wow.
So that would be like a zone 3 paddock that's touching up against a really important corridor, zone 2, so that as we're walking past, we can see the dairy animals, and there's an alleyway that actually connects back up to this hub here.
Wow.
So from there, we come into the hub of the system. This is our integrated livestock system. So our chickens, our pigs, our dairy cows, and at certain times of the year, our beef cows, all come back to that system whenever they need something from us.
Yep.
So how the system, if we need to sort animals, that's where we farrow. Our pigs, that's where all the animals overwinter. The chickens, the house actually never moves. We've played around with the Joel Salatin style chicken tractor, and I can talk more about that later. Why we actually scrapped it, and why we decided to, for our context, it didn't make sense. So all the animals range out into these various hubs. So there's a pasture, silvopasture hub. There's a annual cropland hub. There's a garden hub, that tilled area right there. That's another garden that the chickens and pigs go out into at different times of the year. Just over to the right of the screen is actually a riparian or a wetland area that has been planted to cattails that we use to finish my pigs on in the fall. So cattails are one of the most productive root crops on the planet, more productive than potatoes. Wow. And they if you look at the nutrient density level of and all the metrics of cattails, they beat potatoes, rice, and barley on every single metric you compare it to for protein, carbohydrate, digestibility. Everything is better. And so, but that's not available till August. And so all these animals just rotate around these spokes around a central hub, doing different jobs for us at different times of the year, but it's super efficient for us to manage these animals. And this is a really great homestead system. And then when we get out, zoom out a little bit further, we kind of go over here, you can see that's where we get into zone 4 and 5, is we've got our beef cows. So our beef cows don't need a lot of management from us. All they need is water and access to grass. That's it. And so we have a really great pasture pipeline system. There's a water tap within 200 feet of anywhere on the farm. And so all we need to do is move electric fencing, and our herd can go anywhere on the farm. And they don't need to come back to the central hub because they don't need very much from us. Whereas the chickens and the pigs and the milk cows need to be milked at least once a day. The pigs need to be fed at least once or twice a day. The chickens need to be fed and watered twice a day, grain. And it's not very efficient to haul that stuff all around at the scale that we're operating at. If you get into, the thousands of animals, like Joel Salatin does, then you can have a leader-follower system. But at the scale that we're operating at, you're literally wasting more time and energy going out to manage these animals and then you are getting back from the system. But I'll talk more about that later. So then we get, a little bit further out, you can start to see some of our water harvesting systems, some of our dams. So there's 2 dams right there. That holds back and feeds into our cattail forage system for our pigs. We've got one of our largest swale. That's a 600-meter swale that can hold 200,000 gallons or 800,000 liters when it's at capacity, plus it infiltrates into the ground. And on the left side of the screen there, that's our annual cropland. You can start see there's a bit of bare areas there. So one of the important things with the designing an efficient and effective property is there's kind of 5 rules of permaculture design. The first rule is that any need of an element that your system can't provide for that element results in work. So if your pigs and your cows and your chickens need food and they can't get it themselves, you have to work to do that for them. And the second rule of design is that any yield or product of an element that you cannot use from within the system results in pollution, which means that you have to do more work to manage that pollution. And so by putting elements that share common needs and yields close to each other, that allows them to basically create their own ecosystem, we can eliminate a great deal of work and a great deal of pollution. So, for example, this annual grainland there is, it needs fertility, it needs tillage because we're organic, we don't use herbicides, and it provides a great deal of forage, grain, biomass for straw. And so all those, and then in our livestock systems, they need grain, they need straw. So we put those systems side by side, and it's really efficient for even if the animals can't get it themselves, if we have to get involved, it's right next door. So when we have to spread, the compost from our livestock system from the winter, it's like there's the corral ends and you're into a field. There's no non-productive equipment use that we're involved in, and we also do swath grazing and things out there. And by stacking those needs and yields close together, it results in a really efficient system. That's our hay shed / machine shed right there, and kind of some sorting corrals that we use for our livestock. We don't have animals in there very much.
This is your neighbor's place over here?
Yeah, so that's actually where I grew up.
Oh, really?
So my parents built that place from scratch. My dad bought it in 1984, and we went and certified organic in 1988, and in 2007 they subdivided and sold that property, and we came and started scratch.
Yeah.
So this property, this is our
organic from day one.
Yeah. This is everything you're seeing here. I'm showing you has been built since 2008.
Wow. Okay.
So
wow.
we're 11 years in.
Wow.
I can talk a bit more about what our past kind of cropping systems and stuff looked like, but it
Yeah.
was pretty standard.
Yeah.
So when we start going up a little bit there, that's our second swale, our middle swale.
Okay.
That's 1.5 kilometers long.
This whole one that's going right across the screen here.
Yeah. So, and that one, I need to rebuild it, but the original swale only cost me $700 to build. It's 1.5 kilometers long. It's 4 hours of the D3 cat.
Wow.
And that single swale has captured like tens of millions of gallons of water. Now, I need to make it a little bit bigger, more like the size of the bottom one, but still for the cost benefit of it is just unbelievable. And it's actually located in the thermocline on the property. So it's mid-slope on a south-facing slope with a shelter belt to the leeward side. So it's an excellent microclimate for fruit trees, which is, again, needs and yields. So that whole area that's kind of brownish is because there's no animals that are in there grazing. We actually let the grass grow a bit taller to capture snow, and that whole area is forest garden. So we've got over 30 different species of berries, fruit, nut, like black walnut, bur oak, hazelnuts, and a bunch of berries and fruit trees. And it's all integrated in with our water harvesting earthworks, and our livestock graze around that entire system. So our biome that we live in is the aspen parkland biome. If you walked away from this land and did nothing, it would turn into an aspen parkland, which is groves of trees interspersed with grasslands with ruminants grazing in between. And so our thought is that if that's what the land wants to be, if you did nothing, why are we fighting it to make it do something else? And so can we fast track it into being an aspen parkland and maybe just shift some of the species so that they're a little bit more conducive to what our needs are. Producing food and things like that. So that's our whole plan for the kind of zone 4 and 5 is these agroforestry or silvopasture systems where you've got, perennial fruit, nut, and fiber and fuel systems that are interspersed with grasslands, and our cows rotate around this whole system. And every single one of those swales is part of our water harvesting system that helps to infiltrate water into the ground for our trees, helps capture any nutrient runoff from our livestock that are grazing above slope, and it all just trickles down into this riparian area that is another nutrient capture because of the dams we put in and the cattails that we're using. And
is that this?
Yeah, that's that little island there is actually where so there's a dugout on either side of that, and the reason I did that is to build these dams on either side of that. I needed clay, and a dam needs clay to build it, and a hole in the ground or a dugout yields clay. So you put those two things really close together, and it's really efficient to manage it. But I also want the third rule of permaculture design is that every element serves multiple functions. And so I thought, okay, how can I build this? I need clay. That's the primary reason why I built this thing. But what else can I stack in this? And so I had to strip off the black topsoil before I could get down to clay. And because it's in a wetland, it was quite deep. So I thought, well, what if I just piled all that black dirt in an island, and so that it becomes nesting habitat for wild animals like ducks and geese, and there's this moat of water all the way around it, so predators can't get to it. And so I stripped the black dirt off, made a big pile of that, and then once I got down to clay, I just dug the clay out and trucked it over to where I wanted my dam location, and I just sited it, in that nice large area so that there'd be a decent amount of water around the whole thing, so that we could create some wildlife habitat.
Wow.
And it's like that system there, like to build 2 dams, it was, 4 or 5 hours with an excavator, and then the rest was just tractor work, just hauling it ourselves. So I built those 2 dams in an afternoon. And that whole area is 4 acres, which is, it's like 2.5 million gallons of water that those 2 little dams hold back. Wow. Now, all that infiltrates into the ground. Our whole system altogether, we estimate that we're capturing about 10 million gallons of water every spring runoff and infiltrating that water into the ground. If you look at our annual water use for irrigation, domestic use, and livestock, that 10 million gallons is equivalent to 40 years worth of water that we use. So we've actually noticed there's a subdivision just to the, if you pan up there, there's a subdivision just to the south of us here. Yes, come around to the right a little bit.
Oh, this way?
Yeah, so there's a subdivision down there. Some of our neighbors have said that their wells have increased in flow rate in the last couple of years because of the amount of water that we're infiltrating into the ground. Wow. So you can see those little circles up there. That's where we're doing some bale grazing in the wintertime. So the old saying is that shit runs downhill, so shit on the hills. And then you can use gravity as your nutrient spreading mechanism. So part of our nutrient cycle that we're managing on the farm is to bale our forage in areas where there's lots of nutrients, which is in the lowlands, and then carry that nutrient to the highlands and feed it in the wintertime when the ground is frozen and we can have animals in concentrated areas without damaging the soil. And so those are just some remnants from this past year's bale grazing cycle. So if you head over to that little island there, you can kind of see that that dam over there, get a straight ahead there, is 110 feet above where we're standing right now. Wow. And so that dam is located in a valley, so it's a barrier dam that we actually pump water from a dugout, which we'll check out later. So water goes up 110 feet in the air, and with a solar-powered water pumping system with no batteries. Batteries are really expensive, they're challenging to maintain, and they're typically the first thing that fails on a water pumping system. And so we're using gravity as our battery. So by pumping water in excess during the sunny times and storing it high in the landscape, we're able to go without any battery systems. And eventually our plan is when we can, we'd like to expand our farm and purchase the next quarter to the north of us. When we can do that, we can extend this swale, and I'll never need a pump ever again because I can capture millions of gallons of water already at that height. And so I built this whole system knowing that the plans of expanding, but we're getting by with a pump right now. So this is the highest swale on our property. It's about 90 feet above where we're standing right now. And we'll talk more about that flood irrigation system because this dam actually floods into that swale, and the swale actually floods into the dam with a simple pipe device called a monk, which we'll take a look at. And so if you just pan up a little bit, you can see our dugout down there. So that's a 1 million gallon dugout that we built just in those trees there. And
in here?
No, right down.
Okay, yeah.
Right down there.
This over here.
Yeah.
Over to it.
And we've also got some aquaculture systems that we're starting to develop in that pond as well.
This is where the minnows are?
Yeah, there are minnows everywhere else, but they're doing the best there.
Wow.
And so all these swales, if you imagine these swales as like the eaves troughs on a house, and there's spillways everywhere, which represent the downspouts, and the downspouts basically just go into another swale. And so there's just these just 3 rows of eaves trough on the property that spill down into each other, and then eventually they get into water tanks, which are like the dugouts and the dams and dugouts. And once they all fill out, they all overflow, and eventually they leave our property just straight across from where we're standing right now. But and I've got some footage of, you can see where everything is full, all the swales are full and it's flowing. Yeah, so when that swale is right full, when that dugout's right full, it just spills out through these trees and into that wetland and carries on everywhere else.
Wow, amazing.
And that's part of our annual cropland. You can see that black strip that is around the field. We're actually a technique that we've been using for growing cover crops in our gardens, our annual gardens, for years. We're trying to scale that up to grow grain. So if you have a field rototiller now, an 8-foot rototiller, but we just purchased it, and the slip clutch broke on it after the first round because it was seized. We didn't know about it, so that's why it stopped. So all this water will eventually infiltrate into the ground, which is actually perfect nesting habitat for ducks and geese. They actually prefer ephemeral wetlands. So it actually works really good that by the time the ducks are hatched in around June 15th, that's when we let our pigs in there to chow down on 120,000 pounds of cattail tubers. So like our pastures have been green for probably a month now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, if you go right in that corner there's a great shot down the.
A lot of wind resistance.
Oh,
that's what's going on.
Yeah, it's. What did I do the other day? I had to. Are you in sport mode?
No.
Oh, if you turn sport mode off or sport mode on,
it'll fight it a bit better.
Well, it's almost like I was having trouble the other day.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Just such a dichotomy.
So I've got that same shot like this time of year, and then in August. So it's like 3 months apart, like from the same shot,
and like right down the middle. This would be a great thumbnail.
Yeah. So I've got that same shot in the spring and in August, so that they're and they've already harvested their crop, and it's brown like that in August again. So their solar panels literally only turned on for 3 months of the year. Because annual crops, like the saying with corn, is knee high by the 4th of July. That's a metric or a rule of thumb for whether or not your crop's going to make it. So that's 2 weeks past the longest day of the year when you could have captured the most solar energy, and the crop is barely out of the ground yet. It's just insane. And you fast forward 2 months later, and the crop is brown and starting to dry off, so you can harvest it. So if our whole agricultural system is about capturing solar energy and converting it into food resources and biomass and things like that, it just doesn't make any sense that we're utterly dependent upon these annual systems. Annuals have a place, but at the scale that we're operating is terribly inefficient. Now, the other interesting metric that most people don't realize is that the people talk about, organic agriculture or permaculture is a great concept, but it couldn't feed the world. Well, if you take a look at the calorific, balance sheet of that field right to the west of us, and you were to look at the amount of energy in terms of calories that went into it in terms of fossil fuels, fertilizer, and spraying it 6 times and everything else, you'd actually find that they were taking 10 calories of energy to produce 1 calorie of food. Mm-hmm. If you look at any conventional crop and you fertilize it at the recommended rate, that's basically a wash just with nitrogen.
Yep.
There's 100 pounds. Most like that crop where we fertilize 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre. A pound of nitrogen is roughly the equivalent to a gallon of diesel. So you think about how far 100 gallons of diesel can take a vehicle. It's a huge amount of energy.
Huge.
And these farmers are applying this per acre. So that farm is 160 acres. That quarter section right next to us. So that means they're using 16,000 gallons of diesel every year. It's insane. That's just the nitrogen. Then you can basically double that again for phosphorus. You can double it again if you're putting on any, with the sprays and the tractor use and everything else. So like our farm, we're using roughly 2 to 4 gallons of diesel per acre for the whole year.
That's a massive order of magnitude.
Yeah. But the reason is because we're not fertilizing anything. And so like a John Deere tractor or any tractor is actually really efficient, and it's like the force multiplier that hydraulics give you is just unbelievable. And so we're baling all of our own feed, we're growing all of our own grain on farm, and we're using basically 2 orders of magnitude less fossil fuels and producing. We're actually producing food. We're not producing commodities. Like, when was the last time anybody sat down and ate a bowl full of canola? Yeah. Never. No. And versus us, like we're producing, what is it? It's about 12,000 pounds of pork a year, and 10,000 pounds of beef a year. That's some of the most nutrient dense, organs, bones, and fat that you can nourish your body with. Mm-hmm. And on top of all of the food that we grow for ourselves, and we're just getting started. Like when our perennial systems start to kick in, our oak trees start to produce, our farm is easily providing for 60 families right now.
Wow.
And we could probably double or triple that in 10 years once things get going.
Exactly.